Let's talk about book series that I will not be finishing. One of my goals this year is to finish more book series, and I feel like one of the things that will help me do that is to learn to give up on the ones that I'm not feeling. Otherwise, I force myself, I get into reading slumps, and that's just not going to work for us. So in 2025, I'm learning to give up, not on myself, just on some books. Some of these I have no hard feelings towards. I just don't love them enough to feel the need to continue. Maybe one was enough. Some of them there are hard feelings, but I feel like the majority of them, I just don't feel like I'm the target audience. So that's good too. The reason I'm doing this video is because I just finally decided to give up on Defiant, which is the last book in the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. It's the last book. It's the fourth book. I read the first two, gave them 5 stars. Loved them. And then I read book 3, Cytonic. Kind of hated it, to be honest. It's a huge tangent on the series. I feel like the majority of people don't seem to love it. And then I read 2 of the 3 novellas that were like over 200 pages. And then I started this one and I realized I've hated the last 3 things I've read in this series. This isn't getting better. No. Past Emily would have never given up on a series on the last book like this. But like, again, new year, new me, maybe. But yeah, I'm not going to be finishing this series and that's okay. That's okay. Doesn't feel great, but that's okay. Another series that I will not be finishing is linked to The Goblin Emperor that made it to my best books of last year. It's a companion series that I read the first book, The Witness of the Dead, which didn't really care for. I didn't hate it. I love mystery, murder mysteries in fantasy world, and that's what it is. But you're following my least favorite character from The Goblin Emperor, so I wasn't really sold right away, and it was just okay. So when I realized that this is a trilogy, it's okay. One was enough. I realized it wasn't for me. So this one, no hard feelings, just wasn't for me. I still recommend The Goblin Emperor though. It's a standalone, so it's good. I'm also giving up on the Sworn Soldier series. I've read the first 2 books. What Moves the Dead, I did really like. I gave, I think, 4 star. And I appreciated how it's a retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe story. I appreciate how the author kind of mixed the classic horror elements and added a little bit of like modern humor in there. And it was just great. I mean, like, the main character visits, you know, friends that are getting sicker and sicker, and you're like, oh, is it the house? What's going on? Are they haunted? It was good. Then I read book 2, and it was okay. I mean, you still get those like kind of fantasy elements, kind of retelling almost elements, and it was just okay. So when I noticed that there was a 3rd book coming out, I think this year, I decided that I had enough. It's just not for me. And again, no hard feelings with this one. I've enjoyed the author in general, but I feel like the last 2 books that I read by her was just okay. So I'm gonna slow down a little bit, but at this point I've read like 5 of her books, so I do overall like her, just I'm taking a break, basically. It's not a breakup, it's a break. The Lady Astronaut series was recommended by you, actually, because I'm a big fan of sci-fi. This one is more like a sci-fi historical fiction, which not really my thing, historical fiction in general, but you're following these women trying to become, you know, astronaut, and they have to deal with, you know, the misogyny. There's also other characters having to deal with racism, and I feel like that portion was handled kind of weirdly, and overall I just wasn't super emotionally invested, so no real hard feelings there either. I just didn't vibe with it, so I think it's a trilogy and 1 was enough. Next, there are very hard feelings. I loved the Book of the Unnamed Midwife. Absolutely adore it. This is a post-apocalyptic book, really apocalyptic with the beginning of the first book. I love this. This is one of the best ones I have read. I've recommended a ton, but I recommend you read it as a standalone, which it can be. But then I made the mistake of reading the Book of Edda, which is book 2. It's almost a companion novel because it's like 100, 200 years later. So like, it's not, you know, following the story, but it's the continuation. But it has all the elements that I don't care for with like the classic post-apocalyptic books. A lot more violent, a lot more like military, just bad men doing bad stuff. You know, it's not my thing. So I did read that one. It was not great. And there's a 3rd book, the book of, I think it's Flora. And that one is following a character that is in book 2 that I'm just not interested in continuing the story, basically. So I highly recommend you read book 1, but I'm kind of mad I continued because no. This one is very unserious, but I read The Ex-Hex, which is the Graves Glen series. I wanted something a little cozy, a little different. I love witches, and this is like a romance spicy kind of novel, and it's not super heavy on the spice, which is not my thing, but I wanted to enjoy this because sometimes you just want something light and fun, and it kind of was that, but then not. It's kind of an enemies to lovers story, which is fine. My issue is that they broke up years ago. He's not supposed to come back to town, and he comes back and there's been a hex on him and everything goes wrong magic wise. And unfortunately, they were so focused on having spicy time that they weren't fixing it, and they were acting like teenagers in the sense that they could have just told someone and they would just hide it and then just avoid it. It got really frustrating, so instead of enjoying myself, I just was focusing on the wrong thing, like please talk to an adult. So for that reason, I'm not going to continue this series. I feel like it had potential to be just a fun thing and it just wasn't for me. This one is also very unserious, but I read The Appeal and it was good, but apparently there was a Christmas version. So like, is it truly a series? I don't know. We're just going to allow it. The Appeal was fun. I enjoyed the format. So this author in general tends to write her books, specifically in this one. It's a bunch of email, text messages, and the two police officers that are like reviewing those documents have to figure out who murdered who. Theater troupe and someone was murdered, and you're discovering things along them through the documents. So interesting format. It got a little long for me, but overall it was enjoyable, but I will not be reading the Christmas version. I think a few of you told me it was actually good, but I think one was enough for me. I'm a little bit more bitter with the rest of this list. So we do have Letters of Enchantment, which is the series with Divine Rivals, which I read. This is a YA fantasy, which started okay. Like, it's a enemies to lovers. Like, these two main characters are trying to compete for the same job as journalists in this fantasy world. There's also a war going on. So it starts fine. Like, everyone in the office knows that they want to, like, enemies. But then they get sent to investigate the war, and it becomes like very insta-love, like flip-flopping completely, and it becomes about that, and I kind of just lost interest completely. So it's super popular though, so it might just be me. I feel like in YA books in general at this point, I'm very picky, and it just didn't work for me. Again, it's okay. To be honest, I don't really see what people see with this series. It happens. Next one made it to my worst books of 2024, so it's not going to be a shock that I will not be continuing the Demon Cycle series. The first book being The Painted Men or The Warden Men, depending on your edition. I wanted to love this because it sounds interesting, this magical version of our world where people had magic to protect themselves against these demons coming out of the ground, and then they kind of beat them. So the demon disappear for a while, humanity forgets about magic, starts focusing more on science, and then the demons come back and we're completely unprepared. And that's when, the story starts, which, cool. I was very much intrigued. However, the world is very sexist, which can be okay. I feel like I'm pretty sick of it, but like it can be okay. However, I feel like there's a line where it becomes the author being sexist, and the storyline of the female character is definitely making me feel like that. Basically, mild spoiler, she goes through a lot with every male character she encounters, but towards the middle, there's basically a gang grape scene. And 2 days later, she has spicy time with the main male character and tells him she loves him. And like, that was, the last drop for me. Like, please. So I kind of hate Reddit for more than half the book because of that. Yeah, don't need to say anything else. I'm not going to continue. I highly doubt the storyline will compensate for any of that. And I've heard that her story keeps going in that direction. So no thank you. No thank you. One of my biggest disappointment of last year would have to be The Bone Season, which is like 600 and something pages that feels like a prologue. So I think this was popular whenever everyone was reading and writing those like dystopian novels, and you kind of get those vibes, which got me excited, but it's very much she has magic. She gets to become almost a slave to this hot dude, insta-love feelings, but and she keeps putting everyone in trouble. Like, nothing happens to her, but like everyone else dies around her because she's being an idiot. And I got just more and more frustrated, and nothing happens for like 600 pages. Apparently gets better. I don't care at this point, but yeah, I was really disappointed because I had heard good things. I was excited. The cover is gorgeous, and I like the other books also by the author. So like, again, I was super excited, and I will not be continuing this series. I don't care. I think it's going to be a 7-book series too, but no, done. The Housemaid. How is this even a series? Like, I know Frida McFadden is super popular, and I've been vocal at this point about my hatred of her writing. This one was so bad that I genuinely believe that some of the scenes were happening in the character's head, and she was delusional. No. So she gets hired to be a nanny, a housemaid, whatever, to this family, and she gets way too invested. We're just gonna word it that way. No. And the ending, you're gonna make it... No. She's popular though, so people find her very readable, so you do you. Yeah. I usually really don't judge other people for what they read, but like the quality of the writing is really, really poor. I don't know if this one counts, but you know, my channel, my rules, I guess. I loved A Master of Jinn. It is technically a standalone. It's another like fantasy with a murder mystery. I really enjoyed the book, and there's a bunch of short stories, novellas that go with it. I did read one of them and did enjoy it, and then I tried to read the second one and I just couldn't finish it, got it returned to the library, and I know there's a few other ones and I just wasn't into it. So not sure it really counts, but we're gonna include it anyway. But yeah, do recommend Master of Jinn though. Excellent, but the novellas. And then we also have the Vampire Chronicles. I did read Interview with the Vampire, and it was okay. There were definitely, like, again, the storyline of the young girl being turned into a vampire. No, creepy, ew. But the story was okay, but I have absolutely no interest in continuing. I don't know why. Sometimes it feels like authors feel the need to continue publishing, like The Housemaid, because, you know, money, publisher probably, you know, pushing them. That's one was enough. One was enough. So yeah. So now that we've removed a bunch of book series that I am not going to finish in 2025, I'll be able to focus on other ones that I will hopefully give 5-star to. I did a video announcing the 20 that I'm hoping to get to in 2025, and I also did my first reading vlog trying to continue as many of them as possible. I will be doing that all year long, so definitely stick around if you enjoy this challenge. And I would love to hear your thoughts either on the series that I mentioned or your own goals. What book series do you need to give up on in 2025? It's not easy, but I feel like it makes a huge difference. So I will see you in my next video. Bye.